Hi, I'm Noreen. Welcome to Voices of the Erased, where I share information related to loving bonds of children and parents being erased and the consequences from this trauma. Today we are finishing up the third part from chapter 3 of the book Parents Acting Badly. And in listening, I'm looking for you to engage with us and with others down below. And the question or the comment to address is how do you now see that PA is not junk science, but it is good science? It's legit. We're picking back up on page 37 with the third section. And this one is called Evaluating Scientific Merit. And I love what the authors did here because we see the bridge between research and conversations about domestic violence and the path we're taking about PA, learning about it, researching it. The parallels are great. All right, page 37, Evaluating Scientific Merit. The question remains as to whether the methods used to study PA are scientific or not. We feel it will be useful here to contrast research on PA with research on domestic violence, which has not suffered the same junk science criticism. In order to be considered scientific, the method, whether descriptive, explanatory, or predictive, must have the following characteristics. It must be replicable, precise, falsifiable, and parsimonious. So let's take a look at being replicability. This means that another researcher can replicate the methods used by the researcher, repeat the study, and obtain similar results. Both domestic violence and PA research typically employ surveys and interview methods, and there have been decades of research in both areas showing replicable patterns of predictors and consequences of the behaviors. Number 2, precision. This entails having definitions of a concept that allow others to be able to use the same definition in their own research. While there's not general consensus on a single definition of PA, that's a topic for another day, there is generally agreement in what clusters of behavior constitute it. I think that's really important to say. Across nearly all the research we have reviewed so far, PA has been clearly described in terms of how it differs from other behaviors like estrangement. However, reliable measures distinguishing these behaviors have not yet been developed. This problem does not mean that the PA term is not precise. Rather, researchers have not yet found accurate ways of measuring it. And we got to get an accurate definition and understanding of what it is, but more importantly, what it isn't. All right, back to the book, page 38, middle. While precision is an issue for nearly all scientific research that measures abstract concepts, the larger issue here is that many people deny that PA exists at all, or have their own lay definitions of what they think PA is. And these gaps in understanding, and I'm going to add here bias in people's perspectives, they dramatically impact research results. For example, one research study found that clinicians who believed PA was a problem were able to reliably identify cases when it was present in case scenarios that they reviewed. Unfortunately, many mental health professionals also declined participation in the study because they did not believe in the PA syndrome. So there's a bias. And just as a sidebar, this section I keep going back to as a lead evaluator of teachers and administrators in a state. What's the evidence? It's not about a feeling. It's not about identity. It's about the evidence, what presents itself. And I really hope that we talk more about checking the bias at the door. And in just hanging up the phone with a target dad, we had a big conversation about the bias that he had encountered through the court system. All right, I digress. Does this mean that the results of their study were not good? No. The researchers used a clear description of what PA is, but they also uncovered reluctance of some clinicians to acknowledge its very existence. We will get to the why question later in this book, and I can't wait. All right. Domestic violence is an umbrella term for many different abusive behaviors, such as physical and emotional violence, financial abuse, coercion, control, date rape, stalking. The complexity of the definition poses challenges to researchers because factors like work stress spillover associated with one type of abuse, like physical violence, may not generalize into other types, like if you're going to look at stalking. All right, lay definitions of abuse may also vary by the participants. Again, there is bias kind of coming into it. So we got to agree on the same definitions, the same descriptors, and check the bias at the door. When we searched a scientific database for research studies on domestic violence, there were over 8,000 studies identified. PA, 270. Yeah, you heard me, 8,000 versus 270. Due to the sheer amount of published studies on the topic, we could not conduct a thorough review of how domestic violence was defined in each one of those studies. However, we did notice a number of studies that either focused on specific types of violence or defined the topic quite generally and provided examples to participants of what domestic violence is. So, think about the different behaviors encountered, or again, think of PA as explain it, but more importantly, provide what the examples would be in a study. Okay. We argue that there is similar variability in the quality of definitional precision across domestic violence and PA research studies. All right, falsifiability. This means that the theory used to test a research question is stated in such a way that it can actually be proven false. Due to the fact that there is currently less research on PA than domestic violence research, there have not been as many theories about why or how it happens yet. A considerable amount of research on domestic violence has been descriptive as well, so it's arguable that both PA and domestic violence research have suffered to some extent from the falsifiability problem. When the definitions of the behaviors being studied are not precise, they cannot be measured or tested with accuracy, which then also leads to these issues. Given that PA definitions are quite precise, this makes falsifiability greater than in studies where domestic violence is not defined clearly. Okay, the fourth one, the big word, parsimony. This means that if there are multiple explanations for a behavior, the researcher selects the simplest or the most logical explanation. All right, we're taking a complex word and we're making it simple. From our reviews of the research on both topics, PA and domestic violence research are not very dissimilar in their parsimoniousness. Now there's a mouthful. I like that word. Both bodies of research have identified and tested specific factors associated with their outcomes, and many of the proposed and tested relationships were drawn from initial qualitative research. Okay, that would be interviews. Although there are a number of factors that have been associated with parental alienating behaviors, we have not seen studies proposing multiple and complex webs of factors that explain the behavior. Most have been quite simple and clear. So, in summary, scientific evidence for parental alienation is not based on junk science. Research in this area is new, and therefore it has been published so far. It's largely descriptive and predictive in nature. And that's just so far, folks. The irony we see in the argument that research on parental alienation is being junk lies in the fact that the methods used to study it so far have not been much different than those used to study domestic violence, a scientifically accepted phenomena. Okay, I hope you're listening very good right now, folks, because when you encounter somebody that says, there's no such thing as PA, it's junk science. This is a big deal right here. Page 41 in the book. All right. So let's see. Let me repeat that. The irony we see in the argument that research on parental alienation is being junk lies in the fact that the methods used to study it so far have not been much different than those used to study domestic violence, a scientifically accepted phenomenon. Like parental alienation, it would not be ethical to randomly assign people to particular relationships where there's an abuser to see what happens to victims. We must rely on cases where domestic violence or parental alienation exists in its varying forms and see what the predictors and the consequences are. Given such staunch denial by many about whether parental alienation is even real, it is no wonder that the majority of the research so far has focused on documenting its existence, its impact on mental and physical health outcomes, and perceptions of judicial and clinical professionals working with clients coping with the problem. In Chapter 1, the authors discussed having conducted a large qualitative interview study of their own to explore PA as a way to better understand not only what's going on, which is descriptive, but why it's happening, there's predictive. That said, this book does not serve as a formal report on our research findings. In the near future, the authors are going to be employing stringent qualitative analysis techniques on the interview transcripts in order to examine specific research questions for scientific publication. Rather, the purpose of this book is to provide a review and reframing of this issue. To do this, we will be presenting research findings on PA and other social science research, and offer evidence from our own interviews to support and bolster the associations that others have found. We recognize there's limitations to all research methods, but it's important to note that when multiple studies with different samples and different research methods report similar patterns of results, like the association between narcissism and parental alienating behaviors, then we can have confidence that there is an important relationship here. So indeed, a critical review of research on PA research has discussed that even though studies to date have varied in its methodological rigor, there is concordance and consensus across studies that makes their findings very reliable. Research so far demonstrates with confidence that it does exist, folks. PA does exist, and research finds it. And there are a number of findings that are based on empirically sound methods. Again, this research area, it's in its infancy. There's much more work that needs to be done. This book reviews research studies that have a sound methodological basis and or have been replicated in some form. We argue that parental alienation is the new domestic violence of our time, and it needs to be uncovered, recognized, researched, and treated with the same respect. Let me say that again. We argue Authors argue that parental alienation is the new domestic violence of our time. It needs to be uncovered, recognized, researched, and treated with the same respect. So, folks, down at the bottom, make your comments. It's reliable. It's valid. The research there. PA's a real thing. What are your thoughts? What are your experiences? Post them below. This concludes Chapter 3 of Parents Acting Badly. Take a look at the links. And I got to tell you, this one is important to put on your bookshelf to revisit. And in the back, all of the research articles that are cited are absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal. All right. Take care. God bless.